Three, two, one.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Noobs, a podcast where we share advice and meet and talk with students all across the country about the creative industry in advertising and helping entry level and creative students get a leg up, get some advice, learn some tips and tricks from each other around their portfolios, how to interview, and all that stuff of breaking into the advertising industry. But today we have a little bit of a different agenda for you. We're going to actually meet with a fantastic executive creative director from a top agency in the country who's going to share a little bit of his perspective about how he got into the industry and what he looks for and likes in student portfolios and to see from students. So here we go. Today we have Rikesh Lal. Hopefully I didn't butcher your last name. It sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rikesh comes to us from San Francisco, Bay Area, where he's working for Erich and Kallman as the executive creative director. And man, you've worked at a handful of the agencies. I think, I and most people in the industry really admire Camp and King, Hal Riney, AKQA, and your background too is in art direction and design, which samesies here, fellow designers here. So we might geek out about things like kerning and typography and ligatures. I apologize. But,
I've got notes on that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And you've also taught over the years, I've seen that and we talked a little bit, like you've taught off and on and as sort of an adjunct or guest teacher at various creative or advertising schools. So you just make the perfect guest for our students to hear from. And really appreciate you giving your time and your energy here today.
No, of course. I like I said earlier, like I love giving back to the community in that way. There's a lot of things that I wish I would have known, coming in. And so my goal is hopefully in this podcast to give all y'all, something to take away and hopefully do a lot better than I did when I started out. So yeah,
That's awesome. Well, speaking of which, like maybe just a quick background. Obviously, everyone can snoop on you on LinkedIn and your bio, and your website. But maybe just to hear from you, your background and how you got into, how you broke into sort of the advertising, design, creative side of the business.
Yeah, for sure. I can. I don't know how far you want to go back, but I mean, I could definitely go at
Third
least.
grade art contest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, it was X-Men comic books that got me interested in art when I was a kid.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally nerded out, as you can see with all the paraphernalia on my wall, a lot of pop culture stuff. That really got me into drawing, and I kind of parlayed that into was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to the California College of the Arts, which was an amazing art school. I thought I was going to be some like highfalutin, crazy, cool artist. I entered the drawing and painting program, and then realized halfway through that, I could do this on the side. Like I don't know if I need a degree, but if I am going to get a degree, I probably need something that I could parlay into a career to help supplement my art side, And so
Nice.
I switched over to graphic design and then kind of never looked back. I mean, I don't really have a formal advertising school education. I didn't go to ad school, but I had an amazing stroke of luck, if you will, with just being in the Bay Area and meeting all sorts of great agencies at the time that there were, when I got out of school, I was working at a design studio, got super bored. I had this studio that I was working at where I think there was a full week where I was literally kerning an address on a business card. And I think that's the moment where I decided, ooh, I need to be doing something a little bit different. I can't just be doing this all day. I mean, granted, that level of craft is amazing and I love the rigor. Yeah. But I had maybe, some higher ambitions. And so I started shopping my book around and, back at that
time. It was mostly a design book.
Yeah, it was mostly a design book. And it was kind of like abstracted design work. So I wouldn't even call it visual communication in the traditional sense. It wasn't like I was doing an ad, or it was more like art and posters with words and, forms and shapes and things like that. it was, I was still carrying that like aura of like, I'm going to be an artist, or an
That's
artiste,
awesome.
if you will.
That's
And
awesome.
so, but again, I needed to make money, coming out of school, I had, student loans, bills to pay, all that good stuff. And
Yeah.
so, I put my portfolio out onto websites at the time. And this is, I mean, I'm dating myself. I'm going to sound really old, but like around 2003, 2004, there were a lot of like designer kind of forums and websites where you could post your work. And that caught the eye of a creative director over at Butler Shine Stern and Partners, BSSP out here in Sausalito.
Yep.
And
Great shot.
yeah, it was a great shop. And, John Butler brought me in. He took a look at my portfolio. And again, back then, we were actually carrying physical portfolios, big
Yeah.
folios full of posters, printed works,
Yeah.
books, etc., all that good stuff. I had digital work as well, and all of that. And, he came in, kind of just sat there, looked at everything, and was like, I don't know what the fuck this is, but I want you here. And
That's
and it's
awesome.
funny that stuck with me, right? I mean, like, 16, whatever it is, well, actually, no, 20 years later now, that stuck with me because I think the chance that he took on me, and my creative director at the time too, he also took on me, um, is the type of thing that I want to that I always try to look for in people. Like, what is that surprising element, And so that's always stuck with me. And kind of the rest is history. I started out as a production designer just because I was so new to advertising. They were like, you've got to learn the ropes. I was. This is the early days of digital. Interactive work. And so I was coding banners, creating websites, microsites, all these fun little interactive things. And then, that started to catch the eye of a lot of people internally. And they were like, and the way that I thought about things was a little bit more conceptual. And I was like, oh, we could add this fun
Yeah.
idea to it. And so then my creative director at the time, who's now my best friend, he was like, have you ever thought of becoming an art director? And I was like, well, what the fuck is that? And he's like, don't worry, we'll teach you. And
Wow.
so, I kind of learned on the job, and understood what it took to concept the role of an art director, partnering up with writers to come up with ideas, how to visualize things. And what was really nice is I had that art background. And so I was really good. I like to think I was really good at being able to kind of communicate visually, an idea, and kind of prove out why an idea works, because I can sketch boards,
Yeah.
that's a lost art nowadays, probably
Totally.
not a needed one because of AI, and and just the abilities of Photoshop nowadays. But back then it was, it was all scamps, and
Well, I think it's still important, like with my students when I teach, or when I'm working with like some of my teams. I still encourage them to like sketch things out before they jump on the computer. And I know some people are just blazingly fast on the computer too. Like I just, I'm even more old school than you, Rakesh. But like, I was around before there were even like before everything was like paste up. In when I very first got started, and um, it's just incredible how some of these young talents are just incredibly lightning fast on the computer. And now AI is making them be able to express some of their ideas through reference even quicker,
yeah,
which is super cool.
yeah,
But I do think there's something about just that, pen or pencil on paper to kind of quickly get down an idea, even if it's just chicken scratch type stuff. Like I'm not an amazing like I've kind of lost my touch on the detail drawing and like realistic drawing, but I think reference drawing, right? Of like being able to tell a narrative in a couple of story frames really quickly with a gesture, or like if something's static, being able to sort of quickly say like, well, what are the proportions or the relations of these elements? Like I can do it in 2 seconds,
yeah.
with my pencil in my journal. And I do think that that's, I hope that's still being encouraged with a lot of students out there to think with your pencil or your pen.
Absolutely. I mean, I still do that. It's funny you mentioned
Yeah.
that, Norm, because like I still do that in my day to day when I'm talking to my creatives as well. Eric and I do this a lot too. Where we'll sketch things out if we're like, oh, we're looking for a camera move, or this is the type of shot that we're looking for. We kind of do it more in the perspective of like a storyboard,
Yeah.
or at least for me when I'm working with my designers and art directors, layouts as well. Yeah, exactly. It's such a fast way to generate ideas.
Yeah.
And I think the throwaway nature of sketching makes everything less precious, so you don't have to noodle it as much. I feel like when you get to a computer, it feels like you have to be a little bit more precious and considered, whereas like on a piece of paper, it can be fucking anything, right?
That's a great point. Yeah, you can sort of generate a lot of different things that are potentially just horrible and stupid, but they lead to something, right? Like because
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
messy process to get to the final idea, and sometimes you have to kick a lot of different variables around.
No,
Really
absolutely,
good point.
absolutely.
Really good point.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what do you like? Speaking of, I haven't seen anyone carrying a black case around lately. So
Probably
what
not
do
a
you
good
like
idea.
to see? Yeah, yeah,
I'd
yeah.
look at
And
you like,
I mean,
are
maybe
you a
that would be brilliant, though. Maybe
yeah.
that would be brilliant to like someone to like go against the grain and just like print everything out on blackboards.
Yeah,
Um,
or I'd ask if you were a time traveler, but yeah.
but what would you say, like in a nutshell, is kind of like what do you look for in a student book, like an entry level book?
Yeah,
Somebody really fresh coming out of school, or maybe they haven't even been in school, but they've just put their initial book together.
yeah. Well, I mean, maybe I can answer that question by kind of backing up a little bit and kind of flipping it. It's like there's certain things that I see in books lately that really irk me.
There you go. Yeah, sure.
and and I'll kind of answer your question in kind of the flip way, but I will
No,
get
that's great.
get
Yeah,
to that. There's one thing that I've noticed. There's like this trend. I want to say it's in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years or so, where a lot of student books will end up just putting a big case study slide. And when I mean case study slide, it's usually large full bleed image with a lot of like small copy talking about the concept, but it's all in one little, let's call it 11 by 17, old school
yeah,
print,
yeah.
kind of,
Like a
kind of
horizontal.
frame. And to me, I think when I see that, it shows, it doesn't show me that you've really curated and considered how someone's going to like uh take in your idea, or and so I feel like that works in like a student setting when you've got to do a presentation and all of
Yeah,
that, and you can voice that over and do all of that. But when you just throw it up on a website, like, I don't have the time to process what's going on in a layout like that. Like, break it down for me, break it down into kind of the most succinct way if you can. Like, the one thing that I think that a lot of the students, and hopefully the students that are watching, should really understand is like, as CDs, as ECDs, as CCOs, people that are looking at your books, like, we usually don't have a ton of time, and you have to think about like the trajectory that your book,
yeah.
or the path that your book got to someone like me, right? It's usually coming through a recruiter, or someone at HR, or someone in kind
A
of talent.
referral. Yeah,
Exactly. And so they're sending it your way, and you're probably looking at like anywhere from 10 to 20 in one sitting. And so for me, it's really about like, as because I just don't have the time to go in depth through every single book. It's more about like scanning, right? And so for
yeah,
me, like, if I can see that you've constructed your and even if it's like a case study that you're talking about, you're giving me the objective, the challenge, and then how you solved it. Even if you put it in that simple structure, I know that you have a really good handle on how to explain an idea, right? Which to me is like entry level. Like, great, number one, great, you've got me. Now I'm going to process what I see. you know um, I think a lot of the times what happens is students, because they're so excited about their ideas, and I love that energy, but sometimes they over engineer a lot of what they're trying to present, and it kind of overshadows
yeah.
maybe the interesting, the simple, the smart part of your idea. And so I would say, to those folks, like, show me how simple you can break down an idea. Like, big headlines. Again, like, we work in a short communication medium, right? So I think the most important thing you can do is like, show me how succinct your thinking can be.
Yep.
given our short attention spans, right?
Yeah. No, it's that is spot on. You know, I hear that from a lot of CDs, senior level creatives. It's like one of the big misses I think that a lot of students make. And I think your perception too of like why students are doing that is totally spot on. It's not like that they just don't know. They're just so excited to, like put this thing together. They have this big idea and they're not understanding the sort of their audience. I actually sometimes say to my students like your portfolio is kind of like another ad that you have to put together for creative directors. Your audience is actually creative directors,
Absolutely.
like for your book, right? Obviously your campaigns and your designs and the stuff you put together has its briefs and audiences, but like your book as a whole has to sort of be a narrative that CDs are going to get quickly. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
kind of speak their language. Yeah. I mean, you can
yeah,
make little variations to show uniqueness or have innovation, but if you overdo it, it might fail, so
yeah,
you got to be careful. And like another thing I see, I'd be curious on your reflection on this is students leading, like if they have, let's say they have 5 or 6 campaigns and then maybe some one-offs or various like other sort of miscellaneous designs, but their core campaigns, they'll lead with these sort of like 2 to 3 minute case study videos that frankly like many times are not, they get the idea across, but they're juniors, they're not going to be produced
like
amazing.
pencil in my,
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
And that
You
was kind of
know,
my point earlier was like
yeah.
I can't.
Does that fall in the same camp for you?
Yeah, totally. Like we
Yeah.
just don't have the bandwidth, and usually,
Yeah.
like you also have to remember, like the resources that an agency has to create a case study is very different than the resources a student would have. So
Mm.
by putting that in there, I'm already going to judge you by the caliber that I understand,
Yeah.
which is unfair, right? So then why put it in your book?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also don't have the time, to spend 3 minutes, looking at a case study. I'd rather look at like how you got to the idea, how smart the idea is. Like really put the idea up front. Like that's the king,
Yeah.
that's the thing that's going to be put out to the world. I know that, we do that with clients to walk them through the idea and all of that, but like you have to think of me as more of a consumer, a viewer,
Yeah.
and how would they perceive that? And I think if you think about your portfolio in that manner, you're
Yeah.
gonna really curate it in a different way.
That's awesome, Rakesh. That's really awesome advice. How else would like a entry level or junior student like catch your eye, other than the portfolio? Are there other things? Do you appreciate sort of tricks, stunts, gimmicks, or any other topic that sort of might fall under sort of the miscellaneous that you've seen?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, tricks for sure. I mean, I think I've gotten things like, it's funny. Eric and I were talking about this. We got postcards from a student that, and he would send them weekly, and
Nice.
I love the energy, but he was just sending postcards and not really doing much else. And it was just like
Oh,
he was like putting these out as like a note, like I'd love to work with you, but there really wasn't an angle on it, right? And so if you're gonna do something like that, it should be really interesting.
yeah.
Um,
Or have like a through line, like a narrative or a point.
exactly. I
Yeah.
can't remember. It was years ago, but there was a guy that showed up to an ad agency, and I can't remember the ad agency, but he showed up as a delivery guy with donuts. And then, it was a box of donuts. And then inside of the donuts was like a little card, a brochure or something with his like, QR code for his portfolio and everything. And I'm like, that's fucking smart. Like think about like the way an agency runs and works. Like, is there a way to kind of incept yourself into that? That only works if it's backed up with great work, right? You've
Yeah.
got to kind of think
Yeah.
through everything, not just the gimmick to get you in the door, but
Yeah.
also like how the agency that you want to go after is going to look at your work, right? Because
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I think is really important for students to know is that, you know, certain agencies operate in different ways, whether they're small, whether they're big, they have certain specialties. And so I think also the big key is not to do a shotgun spray of reach out that feels very kind of form,
Yes.
like I would
Yes.
love to work here. Well, tell me why.
Yeah.
And usually the why isn't there, and I think that's another thing that students, and I get it, like, you haven't worked in advertising, so it would be hard to understand, but if you can glean a little bit of like insight as to what type of work that agency creates, whether it's super funny comedy or things that are a little bit more soulful, or things that are more digital and social, like
Right.
kind of
Or if they have like a
tailoring
certain
your
style of
message.
client base, if like they have a certain industry that they serve. Yeah. Tailoring it
Exactly.
to those things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the top line is know the score, right? And and
Yep.
and know who you're reaching out to.
Yeah.
So I think those are really things that I look for. Another thing that I look for too, and that can either be in your book or something you can share with me, like share it with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, hit me up. Like, I always love looking at books when I have the time, when people reach out. Doesn't mean I'm always going to respond, but if it is interesting, I do want to have a dialogue. But
Yeah.
side hustles, I think side hustles are really cool. Like, for me, it gives me a sense of your perspective on the world. And again, like,
Yeah.
the better agencies, the good agencies, when they look for creatives, they're not just looking for great work. They're looking for, what is your take on the world, and is it interesting? Is it diverse? Is it something that we don't already have in the agency that we could bring to the table, that might unlock some other crazy, cool, creative idea?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one.
I think I remember seeing like an interview with Fallon, from Fallon McElligott, for any of our, our students out there, but Fallon, back in the kind of their legendary days,
Heyday. Yeah.
he said something about like, I want to be surrounded by creatives and just, coworkers in general that are just interesting, curious people. Like, I'd want to be able to go to dinner with you,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
for all of his coworkers. And it's like, and like be able to talk about anything but work. And I think that that's such a cool, thing to remind students, is like, be yourself, be, and put yourself into your portfolio, like have your own brand, your own voice, put your own kind of interesting, observations around sort of global perspective, global view, cultural views into, like, don't just make it just about the work. So I think that's another really good point.
Absolutely. My buddy, Roger Camp, he always said, "I'm looking for misfits," and I always thought,
Yeah,
like, the
yeah,
perfect thing, right? You
yeah,
know, looking for people that really don't belong in any other industry but ours.
yeah, yeah,
Um, that's always a thing that we're looking for, because I think there is such a kind of a dogged rigidity to, um, certain schools and how they kind of approach the work. You can tell often, like, where a student comes from based on the school that they're coming from, because they have a certain process that they follow, and it's really clear. And I would love to see, like, kind of how you break out of that. Because again, those are all great things to learn and know, but like, there's no right path. Like, find your own way, and show
yeah,
me that. you know
yeah. One thing I will say, on your note about doing kind of stunts or tricks, have you ever, I mean, I feel like I have a few times, not a ton, but where maybe someone's portfolio isn't sort of the A plus level that I would typically like have standards to, but it's also not horrible, right? Like, they obviously like get it, but maybe they're sort of in that B plus or even B zone, where it's like, okay, they've got a few things, but they're still developing. But maybe they do something that catches my eye, where they do a stunt or a trick or a thing, like a way of reaching out, or showing that they really want to be at Cactus and nowhere else. And I do have to say that, like, I don't know if it's like the flattery of that, or also but it's sort of like, I have taken chances on a few people where me and my ECD or our senior CDs will be like, maybe their book's not pound for pound as good as some of these other candidates, but man, they have this sort of, my football coach used to say, fire in the belly. Like, you have to have that like fire in the belly, and sometimes doing those extra things does show maybe they have some of the DNA, because we can kind of continue to coach and teach the rest of it, if
Yeah.
they are starting to put it together. So I don't know if you've ever had any experience like that or have a
I
different opinion, but
Yeah, no. It's funny. I have. I think it's less of, I wouldn't call it like a stunt or a gimmick, but
Yeah.
he definitely led with it. So there was this creative. This is back when I was at Camp and King. There was this creative that came in, and he was fresh out of school, and he had like a crazy background. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about with perspective. He spent, I think, a year somewhere in Hawaii. I can't remember which island, but his whole job was to bag and euthanize feral cats, and he led the conversation with that. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy has a pretty solid book, but now he's got that story, and like, I want to know more. And we ended up hiring him,
Yeah.
kind of on a, on a flyer. And it worked out. He was amazing. He was like a really super smart thinker. He had a very sometimes dark sense of humor, but I mean that would come with the territory, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the guy was euthanizing feral cats in Hawaii. I guess they were like a nuisance, and so it
I'm
was like,
guessing he was a dog guy.
yeah, probably, yeah. But like the fact that and that's the other thing. I think what's also great about hiring kind of students out of school is kind of understanding where they came from in their perspective. And I think
Yeah.
like fun background, anecdotes, like jobs that you've done, help me kind of build like a persona of you. And kind of give me a sense of like, I mean, talk about misfit. That guy was a total misfit. Like,
Yeah.
he led with that, which told me like that's something that you actually like to do and you were interested in
Yeah.
and you wanted to share with me, which
Yeah.
means like you're going to bring a lot of crazy shit to the table.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're all sort of like weirdos, right? And so it's like, how do you,
yeah,
let your weirdness fly, So, I love that, Rikesh. That's so cool. Okay. Jumping on to another questions here. And answering this more from the point of view of just helping entry level understand. I mean, I don't know where at Erich and Kallman you guys sort of stand on this. I know at Cactus we're probably kind of like in the middle on this sort of philosophy, but it's like really hard to hire entry level. But maybe you can help. And I think a lot of like I know my students who just graduated this last semester, and every just seems like the last couple years have just been a little bit tough for hiring entry level. So there's a little bit of a trend happening, and I'm a believer that those things ebb and flow. It's not like the end of the world. It's not like advertising creativity is going away anytime soon.
yeah,
In fact, I think it's a cool opportunity, like a moment that it's going to like come firing back. And
yeah,
so it is, I think it is a good time to be a student and be entry level. You just have to have some patience, but it's hard. And it's like we were just describing, like it's very competitive. It's really hard. And not a lot of agencies are willing to take a chance on somebody, even if they have a great book.
yeah,
And maybe you could speak a little bit more from the perspective of, like as a market and as a whole breaking in, why is that hard? Help people understand maybe from your point of view as a hiring senior creative, and having worked at places, why is that? Why doesn't our industry just have these programs where we always hire, 6 creatives a year and you just rotate them through? Like,
right,
why can we not do that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I mean, it's kind of obvious to you and me, but
yeah,
to our viewers, they don't. It's hard to get that.
yeah, no, totally. I think there are a lot of factors. I can kind of speak to kind of the general, and then I can talk about what why it is at Eric and Coleman. I mean, I think first of all, like you have to imagine like the industry. We're working with a lot of amazing talent, right? And so we have a very high bar. Great agencies have a really high bar, and sometimes it's hard for creative directors to kind of see the potential in
Yeah.
people. But and that is kind of an overall. But I think what's even more true probably is the fact that, and you've probably seen this too, Norm, is the industry has gotten, I mean, we thought the pace was fast when we first started. I mean, it's gotten so much
Yeah.
faster now. There's this whole like you've got to hit the ground running, as soon
Yeah.
as you join a place. And so we work at this breakneck pace. And so there's this notion that entry level folks just can't keep up with us. The other thing is, I think also, and it probably relates more to like smaller agencies, I would think, is the bandwidth to help develop talent.
Yeah.
When you're a shop that's like 20, 30 people, it's really hard to say like, hey, my ACD, I need you to kind of develop this talent, when the ACD probably has like, is manning one account and probably working on four other projects. Like, when do they have the bandwidth to kind of help coach up folks? And I've been at agencies where we've hired people that are entry level fast, but we really didn't do anything with them. And then what would happen was they wouldn't hang around very long, and it would be like they'd spend maybe 6 months, maybe a year tops. They didn't get anything out of it, we didn't get anything out of it. And I think it's a reality, and it's something that now that being at more of the executive leadership side, that's something that we always talk about. Is it's not just about hiring talent, it's about how do we develop them, how do we create a path for them as well. And so, to the point where I know that here at Erich and Kallman, we've kind of overhauled our development review process, if you will. So we don't do like the things that you are doing well and this is what you need to improve on. Instead, it's like, here's keep doing this, stop doing this, and let's talk about a path of how you want to move forward and move up. Like, do you want to be a CD at a certain point? Do you want to jump into production? Like, do you want to stay a designer, but do you want a path to just being a design director? Things like that.
You want to become a director, like all of those other like
exactly.
What are these aspirations beyond like the next 3 years?
Exactly. So we try to keep
awesome.
like could kind of come up with paths for that. But I think the biggest key is like you have to have a full agency commitment to that, because it is a commitment, right?
And I think it's rewarding to see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you might be kind of over in the Bay Area, but like some of the bigger agencies, and some that aren't even like huge, but some of the bigger agencies are coming out within the last couple of years these sort of like in agency schools, like portfolio schools almost.
Yeah,
and it's really encouraging. It's really cool to see that. So yeah, I do think there's like, obviously our industry could always get better at sort of the training and sort of taking risks on developing people.
That's a great point, Norm. I mean, I was going to say, like, risk is another thing that I think students should understand. Is like, when we bring on entry level folks, like we're taking on a lot of risk, and especially at smaller agencies, that's one role that we can't hire for if you're here. And so we have to make sure the ones that we hire have really something or have something really interesting to bring to the table.
Yeah, really, really well put. Well, thanks for sharing your perspective on that. Yeah. I know that can be a weird one, but it has, and I do think the crux of it is like the speed, but also just sort of the level of proficiency of quality that has to be delivered now and in this compacted time compared to when you or I were kind of coming up in the business. There was more room. There was just more room, and I think patience and time and space for experimentation, growth.
Mistakes,
like fail. Like there was room for failure, and not that there's not. And I think good agencies always have that, but it's just more compacted, more stressful now than it's ever been. So yeah.
Well, and you've got creatives that are, at the agency that have, probably double the amount of projects that I think that we came up going in, and so
Yep.
We need them to deliver there.
Times the amount of platforms and tactics. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, totally. That's a meeting I have later today, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we're always constantly, even to the clients, like, hey, can we buy more time? Yeah.
Any other, like, Rikesh? This has been so amazing, and you're just too kind to give your time and your energy. But any other last like parting thoughts, tips, suggestions you have for kind of the noobs out there?
Yeah, I mean, if there's two things that I think I've gathered over the course of my career, I think the two things always rise to the top. work hard, like work your ass off. Like I can't stress this enough. I know it should go without saying, but like you'd be surprised. I think the it's kind of like that old that old adage that, you know, of Malcolm Gladwell, the 10,000 hours, or, you know, Ira Glass's, you know, taste, developing taste.
Yeah. Yeah.
Working hard will get you more opportunities. The more opportunities you get, the more assignments you get. The more assignments you get, the more creative you get. The more creative reps you get, which means you get better faster. And so that's the whole thing. Is like, I would stress you to work your ass off, be a hand raiser, take every opportunity. It'll just get you to where you want to be way faster, and you'll have a lot more fun doing it. You know, just be open. Like, look at every brief as an opportunity. And that's one thing that I've always tried to do in my career, whether it's like a small print ad, or it's something that's a, you know, what could be seemingly like, oh, a B2B ad, you know, and you turn it into something interesting, you know. To me, that's like the pinnacle of creativity, is can you do the most with the least, you know?
That is awesome. That is awesome. Cheers to that.
Thanks,
Well,
man.
yeah, Rikesh, thank you so much. And hey, everyone out there in Noobs Land, we will see you on the next episode. Thank you, everybody. Rikesh, thank you so much.
You got it, man. Thanks.
Have a beautiful weekend.
Yeah, you too.